what you're seeing in front of you is nothing but a distraction to grab the global food supply before we go into less production from this year forward. It does seem to be control of the food supply. They're forbidding and stopping all farmers markets this year from operating in Montana. So without the farmers markets, again, you're being directed right back into the food conglomerate chain there. There's no option for you. It might be a crime to trade food in the future, where it would be an illegal activity for you to be able to trade produce because it didn't go through some check or whatnot. That's the main thing. If you can control the food, you can control the population. Who was that? Kissinger had been all over that. COVID thing is so far down on the chart that it's just like one pencil mark in comparison to, the 12 million deaths from food every year. And we stopped the entire global economy. So it's got to be something way more grandiose than just trying to protect you. Because, these large corporations and governments don't care about you. They don't want to protect you. They could care less about you. You're just a cog in the machine. That's why they give you a Social Security number, because you're nothing more than a number in the Borg. And now suddenly they're so caring about your health that they want to lock down the entire planet's economy. Nope, it's a reset.
Meatpacking plants. This is pandemic related, and this is the food supply. Memphis meats. This is fake meat. This is what they're calling cell-based meat, where they take a stem cell from a cow and they put it in a gloppy solution and it multiplies, and eventually they have enough to form it into a hamburger shape. It's gross. It's disgusting. It's not meat, but they want to be able to call it meat without telling us that they grew it in a lab. This is part of UN Agenda 21, 2030, 2050. They want us never to eat animals. But if you were the head of a company of factory farms, like the guy from Tyson or the guy from Cargill, what would you do about this cell-based meat thing? For some reason, what they did instead was they invested in it, along with who? Bill Gates and Richard Branson and SoftBank and other people too. But there's some of your usual suspects right there. And what happens when the COVID hits? Well, all of a sudden, wouldn't you know, there's strange high number of outbreaks of positive tests for it at meatpacking plants. Really? What are the chances? Have we heard of outbreaks at the grocery stores at all? Any other companies? No, just the meat packing plants. What are the chances of this? Well, I say there's a really good chance because meat packing plants combine a lot of the globalist agendas. We don't know what's really going on, but we do know Tyson and Cargill were getting ready for a major disruption to their line of work, weren't they? They're investing in fake meat. They know what they're doing. They know that they're going to find ways to force people to eat this lab-grown spew. I'm not going to call it meat. But really what this is a threat to our society. It's a threat to all the people. And it frightens me. Probably one of the most of all the things that's happening right now is the idea of food shortages, because when you learn history, you learn that that is one of the go-to control mechanisms. They do it almost every time if they get far enough ahead in this game.
we find ourselves in the midst of the most aggressive and holistic onslaught of attacks against humanity and liberty that was ever conceived in the midst of a global pandemic. It's described as a farm-to-fork strategy. What this actually is a weapon, a salvo, deployed across modern agriculture and our food supply, and indeed, our ability to feed our families going forward. And of course, when we talk about changing people's consumption habits to match their new nutritional requirements and saying that Europeans aren't eating the right things anyway, how are we going to enable this transition? Under 2020 Green Deal priorities, we'll have about 1 billion euros, and then we're going to spend another 10 billion euros on food and agri-food, and of course insect-based proteins and meat substitutes. So here is the funding of the reality that they want to create, the fake mood, the synthetic food, the cockroach milk and the Soylent Green. And then finally the fact that dairies, not only are they dumping their milk, but there are actually co-ops that are financially incentivizing farmers to quit dairy farming. They want you out of the game. They want to shut down producers. This is where we are now. To stop being a producer, to retire and get rid of your cows altogether. How quickly can they gut the food supply of a nation? Well, we're watching it in real time, and the answer is pretty damn fast in this modern era. The Gates Foundation has rapidly become the most influential actor in the world of global health. We knew that. He's basically running the World Health Organization now. And in agricultural policies. Yes, he's there too. Remember, the food chain reaction game was the other simulation, like Event 201, that talked about food shortages that would result from an outbreak like this. And here we are now, seeing it materialize. Finally, they will take over all food production, as has long been their goal for hundreds of years. And that's exactly what's happening here. They're buying up all the seed production, and they're doing their genomic mapping, and they will replace real heirloom genetics with their transhumanist seeds. So this is just a continuation of the Rockefeller weaponized USDA, again, for hundreds of years. This has been it's been a part of the War Department. Part of the policy that was pushing toxic agricultural practices to the rest of the world from the US. It's not just meat shortages, ladies and gentlemen. They're going, if you will, whole hog against the entirety of agriculture and our food system. All of agriculture, they really want to make the case that farms are being hit just as hard as meat packers. Experts are warning that thousands of farm workers are vulnerable to contracting the disease. I cannot believe this. I can't believe that you can go to Walmart and Home Depot and Target right now and stand in line and buy trash. But farm workers are being said, you can't harvest food. Do you see how ridiculous the situation is? Do you see how blatant the whole lie is on its face? That's why I'm emphasizing this is not just now. This is for seasons to come. And this damage has already happened. And even more interesting, there are also signs from the establishment media that are blaming, that are indicating that it will be food that is blamed, I should say, for the next part of the pandemic. At the end of the day, it's going to either be we get rid of poultry, we get rid of factory farming, or we all die from a pandemic. So they're literally saying it's the meat or we all die. It's no coincidence. At the same time, the EU is saying, yeah, we can go ahead and eat bugs. Go ahead and put that in there, just like the UN told us to. And that the FDA is saying, actually, you can change your ingredients on food now, and you don't even have to update the label. You don't even have to tell consumers what's in your food, as long as it's roughly the same. So you have that cricket protein instead of beef, it's fine. So they're advertising it quite vocally, what we're going into right now, and of course, it was all part of the plan. This is by design. All the language they're rolling out now was used also in this simulation with John Podesta behind it, and again, George Soros funding it. Like I said, it's the same forces at work behind the civil unrest and the food shortages. That's their main angle for control.
food comes from the earth, nourishes our bodies, and is the currency of life. These viruses become far more fatal because of a food system that's designed for profits rather than health. Food is supposed to be health. And yet, most of the chronic diseases of our times are food-induced. The cancers, the neurological diseases, just add the list. Since neoliberalism, making money became the religion of our times. It was deregulated commerce, and the people have had to deal with the multiple crises created by an absolutely anti-nature, anti-people economy. Nothing makes sense because geopolitics has become more powerful right now in dealing with this virus than science. So they're now turning the temporary measures of management of the corona epidemic into permanent measures for creating a new empire based on digitalization. The new forced digitalization to mine our data, our bodily activity, turn us into users of their gadgets. We are users, no more human beings, no more sovereign, and then evaluate us of what we are worth and allocate cryptocurrency to us. This new economy that the billionaires, the tech billionaires are trying to create is basically a surveillance corporate state, which means an end to freedom. But it also means a further distancing from the earth. And now with lockdown, half of humanity has been rendered useless. The other day, one of these people on the road said, "We are being treated like abandoned dogs on a street." That is not how nations are supposed to be. And I don't think it's an accident that such large numbers of workers in India have just been trashed. They want 10% as their digital slaves, 90% throwaway people. I think the corona pandemic and lockdown has shown us that deglobalization can happen, and it has happened. And let's just make this permanent, not the surveillance part. What's basically happening is there now, Silicon Valley is a big investor in a future of fake food. Continue to grow GM soya, farming without farmers, food without farms, and basically, in effect, farms will become factories for producing raw material, carbohydrates, protein, that then are genetically engineered in labs to create the impossible burgers of the world. Well, real food is not an imperfect technology. Real food is the most perfect technology evolved by thousands of years of knowledge of what is good food to grow, what's good food to eat, in which climate. So I think all local groups must watch where that industrial system and that money-making chromatistics mindset is going to move. This system of money at any cost must force. Therefore, they write the laws to make our independence and freedom illegal. They will try to make local food and agriculture illegal. That's why we'd better be ready with our satyagraha and a fight for truth, for real food, for real life, for real health, for real freedom.
The world lockdown and the mass house arrests that were engineered to keep us all subservient mean that thousands of farmers can't get their crops picked. All around the world there are shortages of almost all foods, and other factors are going to ensure that the shortage gets worse. Controlling the oil used to be a way to control the planet. Controlling the food will give big companies control of everything and everyone, and the money.
Der Dateninhalt ist dermaßen erdrückend und was wir hier wirklich deutlich jetzt sagen können, ist, dass der gesamte Schwindel, das heißt die Lüge über das Corona und deren Umgang mit diesen ganzen Maßnahmen aufgeflogen ist.
Vor allem der vermutete Zusammenhang zwischen Infektion und Todesfällen wird kritisiert. Es fehlt die Berücksichtigung von Vorerkrankung, Alter und anderen Faktoren. Die Zahl der Virustoten wird überschätzt. Wichtige Daten fehlen. Ausländische Erfahrungen wurden unmittelbar auf Deutschland übertragen. Dabei wird deutlich, die Politik hat sich von Horrorbildern wie den Abtransport von Särgen im italienischen Bergamo treiben lassen. Mit ungenauen Angaben, Vermutungen und öffentlichkeitswirksamen Aussagen wird das Geschehen dramatisiert und werden drakonische Maßnahmen durchgesetzt. Aus den vorgenannten Zahlen ist noch nicht ableitbar, dass die Gesundheit einer Bevölkerung von 80 Millionen Menschen hochgefährdet ist. An der normalen Grippe sind in den letzten Jahren teilweise mehr als 10-mal so viele Menschen gestorben. Massive Kritik übt der Kollege vom Bundesinnenministerium insbesondere am Robert-Koch-Institut. Die vom RKI gelieferten Daten sind als Grundlage für die Entscheidungsfindung nicht zu gebrauchen. Die Bewertungen des RKI sind durch die vorgelegten Daten nicht gedeckt. Die Bewertungen sind vielfach spekulativ, teilweise unplausibel. Leider besteht der Lagebericht des Krisenstabs alleine aus einer Aufbereitung dieser Daten. Die Datenlage war also dünn und angreifbar. Und doch entfalteten Bundes- und Landesregierungen eine Vielzahl von Aktivitäten mit den bekannten weitreichenden Auswirkungen auf Bürger, Wirtschaft und Sozialsysteme. Dabei wurde gepfuscht, zum Teil unter dem Zeitdruck, der allerdings aus der mangelnden Analyse folgte und getrieben von der Politik, die Handlungsfähigkeit beweisen wollte. Die Reaktion gestern der Tagesschau und des Spiegels und Fokus und anderen Mainstream-Medien lautete unterm Strich zusammengefasst: ein verwirrter Einzeltäter, der zu den rechten Verschwörungstheoretikern zu zählen ist und hier eine große Panik aufbauen will.
Das sind natürlich jetzt eine erdrückende Indizienkette, die zu einer Beweislast sich hier zusammenfügt, die natürlich jetzt nicht mehr wegzudrücken ist. Hier wird eine Überführung einer politischen Kaste dargestellt, die hier quasi große Schwierigkeiten hat, noch mit Argumenten sich da rauszuwinden.
Es begann mit einer Lüge bezüglich eines der an sich größten Skandale dieser Tage in unserem Lande, nämlich dass ein stellvertretender Referatsleiter im Innenministerium nichts anderes als seine Pflicht getan hat, indem er einen über 80-seitigen Bericht erstellt hat, der es in sich hat. Und die Lüge lag darin, dass das Ministerium sofort damit antwortete, er hätte das an die Presse durchgestochen. Meine Damen und Herren, das hat er mal nicht. Dabei, meine Damen und Herren, birgt diese Studie eine ungeheure Sprengkraft. Das hat er nicht alleine in seinem Kämmerchen geschrieben, meine Damen und Herren, sondern er hat sämtliche Abteilungen seines Hauses, die mit KM, also Krisenmanagement, beziffert werden, eingebunden. Er hat sich Expertise geholt und er kommt zu dem für die natürlich erschreckenden Resultat, dass das, was der Innenminister, was der Gesundheitsminister und was die Bundeskanzlerin seit Wochen dem deutschen Volke vorerzählt und vorlügt, ein Fehlalarm gewesen ist, und er warnt vor diesen Konsequenzen, eine Desinformation der Bevölkerung. Die Bundesregierung produziert Fake News. Durch vermeintliche Schutzmaßnahmen, hören Sie gut zu, Herr Kollege, entstehen im Moment jeden Tag weitere schwere Schäden, materielle und gesundheitliche, bis hin zu einer großen Zahl von vermeidbaren Todesfällen. Diese Todesfälle werden durch das Agieren des Krisenmanagements, also durch den Bundesinnenminister, ausgelöst und sind von diesem zu verantworten.
my understanding is they are basically going to get rid of the religious and philosophical exemption and call it the non-medical exemption. There's also going to be more data tracking, right? Tracking those parents that want to opt out of the vaccine program or skip a vaccine.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And I think that for clear-eyed people, what we see here is they're setting the table for instituting a requirement that future Colorado school children be mandated to take whatever future COVID vaccine is out there as a condition for access to public education. It's outrageous what they're trying to do. And of course, you always have to follow the money to find the truth. It's the financial incentives here, and you talk about this as well. Big Pharma is behind this. They've set up phony AstroTurf groups. You had thousands of parents show up on Sunday. In February, when they had a hearing on this, there were 14 hours of testimony, the vast majority of them parents who objected. And the lobbyists who were funded by pharma and corporations set up these grassroots, so-called grassroots groups, phony groups, to show some sort of opposition. There were about a dozen of them. They limited the testimony on Sunday to 1.5 hours each on each side. 22 people each got to speak on one side or the other, when there were thousands of people who had lined up out in the sun to make their voices heard by these legislators who are bought off by Big Pharma. So more people are coming to this from many different angles, not just the vaccine angle. And that was the emphasis of my testimony too, because this is a civil rights issue. It's also a data privacy issue. And once people start questioning this idea that you should always trust the experts, it opens up an entire new landscape of challenging establishment and authority that have lied to us terribly, and cost so much in terms of our own kids' public health and safety. We may not have billionaires backing us, and we may not have Bill Gates and Big Pharma and all of these NGOs that suck up billions of dollars to endanger us, but we have the truth on our side. And I think the people here are not going to give up, and I hope that sends a message to the rest of the country too, because this bill and this racket are coming to every state in America.
No voy a permitir que hagan lo que quieran. Si lo entienden por las buenas, me encanta. Si no, me han dado el poder para que lo entiendan por las malas.
Essentially, I personally believe that this COVID-19 crisis was either facilitated or manufactured to justify this next coming system. This is going to be the digital system of control. And so it's that crisis there, the COVID crisis, coupled with now this civil unrest. In my view, they have always wanted this technocratic dictatorship. They just haven't had the technology to fully implement it yet. Now they do have the technology to implement this. And Just about a day or two ago, the World Economic Forum held a summit, basically, online, where they announced their next initiative, which is called the Great Reset. Basically, coupled with that Great Reset is what they call the Fourth Industrial Revolution, which is essentially merging man with machines. This is the future. This is the World Economic Forum and the United Nations talking openly about this. They need to implement this now because this current system shows that it's failed. COVID showed that this system failed. The unrest, the inequality, the social justice. We need to do this for the betterment of mankind. And they openly say that you will not be able to tell the difference between organic life and artificial life as it relates to humans. They want to re-identify what it is to be human. They're already looking beyond that because they're openly saying that once we get access to people's thoughts and once we get access to people's emotions, we're going to need to create a framework to create a safe space for people to be able to think in. This is straight out of, the worst science fiction novel ever, that they are literally going to be controlling how you think, what you think about, and how you feel about things. It sounds terrifying to me. And it's already encompassing our lives. Everything from the supply chains down to just our daily lives. Everything's moving towards digital right now, but it's all going to be tracked, traced, and regulated, based on our carbon footprints and our social credit scores. It won't be wearable devices. I think eventually we are going to be the devices ourselves. They're going to be a part of us. Like I said, with the immunity passports, it's going to have your medical information, your education, your finances. They do not want any form of independence from the system. It's basically like assimilate or die. If you don't do what we say, then you're a threat to the greater good. That's the kind of the same ideology that we see with the vaccines, for example. You're a threat because you're not vaccinated. Well, that's kind of backwards. If you're vaccinated, then what are you worried about? This is how they operate. It's either, you're either with us or you're with the terrorists, essentially, like we've heard so many times. You're going to be limited on where you can travel, when you can travel, what you can eat, what you can buy, all this kind of stuff. Any semblance of liberty, freedom for the individual, it will empower the individual and the community. They keep saying that they're doing this for the collective good of everyone. Well, the individuals, I think, should be able to decide for themselves what is good for themselves and the families.
It's a plan to disrupt and destroy the existing system. It's a plan of transformation and control. And the goal, of course, is to transfer power from local individuals to a global governance system. It's about breaking down the individual. It's about breaking down your alliance to any old system, any old connection, your family, your old thoughts, your belief system. This is a mental health technique. It's a breakdown and then build back up of the personality. That's used to break down your personality and actually rebuild you as the new man. And you are going to be rebuilt as the new global citizen. And you need to be isolated and moved into the high-density city center where you can be more easily controlled and managed and surveilled. And ultimately, it's about destroying your ability to have a voice, entirely destroying your ability to be free and to be independent. 2020 is a key year in the implementation of this plan.
Vor etwa 30 Jahren schrieb ich diese utopische Fantasie Wackere neue Welt. Es war eine Fantasie über eine Gesellschaft, in der jede Anstrengung gemacht worden war, alle menschlichen Unterschiede auszuschalten und das Produkt Mensch zu standardisieren, um schließlich tatsächlich eine Art von wissenschaftlicher Diktatur zu errichten, die auf einem Kastensystem beruhte. Damit sollte eine völlig regulierte und geordnete Gesellschaft entstehen. In dem Maße, wie die Technik fortschreitet, wird auch die Organisation immer komplexer und gleichzeitig immer mehr zentralisiert. Das Resultat dieser Entwicklung ist zunächst einmal, dass die Kontrolle über die Menschen immer mehr und immer vollständiger in die Hände von Big Business und Big Government übergeht. Das heißt, in die Hände der Großindustrie und der Regierungsspitze. Und zweitens wird das Individuum immer mehr seiner unabhängigen Aktivität beraubt und wird immer mehr zu einem Rädchen in einer gewaltigen Maschine der Organisation. Diese beiden Prozesse führen natürlich zu einem Verlust persönlicher Freiheit und zu einer immer größer werdenden totalitären Macht von oben. Die Diktatoren der Vergangenheit haben ihren Willen durch Gewalt und durch Gewaltandrohung durchgesetzt. Ihr Hauptmittel, an der Macht zu bleiben, war der Terror. Die wissenschaftlichen Diktatoren der Zukunft, das heißt der Typ von Diktatoren, den ich in meiner wackeren neuen Welt beschrieben habe, wird, glaube ich, den Terror vermutlich nicht anwenden. Diese Diktatoren werden von dem Terror Abstand nehmen, nicht etwa, weil sie menschlicher sind als die Diktatoren der Vergangenheit, sondern einfach deshalb, weil der Terror relativ wirkungslos ist. Ich glaube, dass wissenschaftliche Diktaturen sich verschiedener wissenschaftlicher Mittel bedienen werden, durch die man mit den Menschen manipulieren kann. Das heißt, es wird eine Gesellschaft entstehen, in der die Bedingungen wirklich unmenschlich sind, in der aber mit den Seelen der Massen so manipuliert wird, dass die Menschen diese Bedingungen nicht nur akzeptieren, sondern sie geradezu lieben. Bedingungen, die sie eigentlich ablehnen und hassen sollten. Früher konnte ein Demagoge nur zu so vielen Menschen sprechen, wie er mit seiner Stimme direkt erreichen konnte. Das waren vielleicht ein paar Tausend. Heute, dank Radio, Fernsehen und Film, kann er sich gleichzeitig an Millionen wenden. Mit Tonbandgeräten kann er seine Parolen immer wiederholen. Er kann sie in die Massen hineintrommeln, sodass sie in einer Art von Hypnose akzeptieren. Wir sehen also, dass die Technik der Überredung und dessen, was man heute Gehirnwäsche nennt, all dem unvergleichlich überlegen ist, was in der Vergangenheit einmal war. Es gibt heute chemische Methoden, mit denen man die Menschen kontrollieren kann, mit denen man sie veranlassen kann, bestimmte Dinge zu tun, bestimmte Gefühle zu empfinden und mit denen man vor allem die Menschen in einen Zustand künstlichen Glücks versetzen kann, sodass sie sogar ihr Sklaventum und die schlechten Umstände, in denen sie sich befinden, lieben. Jede Technik, die möglich ist, wird früher oder später auch einmal angewendet. Und ich glaube, dass wir uns ohne große Fantasie vorstellen können, dass diese chemischen Mittel möglicherweise einmal von wissenschaftlichen Diktatoren der Zukunft systematisch benutzt werden. Zunächst einmal will mir scheinen, dass es absolut notwendig ist, uns darüber klar zu sein, was vorgeht. Die Öffentlichkeit muss wissen, was in der Welt passiert. Ich glaube nicht, dass die verschiedenen Massenkommunikationsmittel ausreichend benutzt werden, um uns über diese Dinge zu informieren. Sie sind primär darauf gerichtet, die Aufmerksamkeit der Öffentlichkeit abzulenken. Sie bringen uns alle Arten von absurder Unterhaltung ins Haus. Wir müssen aber erkennen, was vorgeht. Und wenn wir uns dieser Dinge bewusst sind, dann müssen wir ernsthaft darüber nachdenken, was getan werden kann. Ich glaube, wenn Moralisten, Theologen, Politiker und Gesetzgeber zusammenkommen, um über diese Probleme zu diskutieren, kann man gesetzliche, politische und erzieherische Mittel finden, die garantieren, dass diese ganzen revolutionären Entdeckungen, die jetzt und in Zukunft gemacht werden, zum Wohle der Menschheit eingesetzt werden und nicht zu ihrer Erniedrigung und endgültigen Versklavung. Das ist unsere beste Hoffnung.
I do not support George Floyd and the media depiction of him as a martyr for Black America. We are being sold a lot of lies, and at the detriment to the Black community, at the detriment to the white community, and at the detriment to America as a whole. For whatever reason, it has become fashionable over the last 5 or 6 years for us to turn criminals into heroes overnight. Now, nobody thinks that he should have died during this arrest, but what I find despicable is that everyone is pretending that this man lived a heroic lifestyle when he didn't. 1998, he spent 10 months in prison for theft with a firearm. In 2002, he spent 8 months in prison for a cocaine offense. In 2004, just 2 years later, he spent another 10 months in prison for a cocaine offense. In 2005, a woman who was pregnant received a knock at the door, and she went to the door. George Floyd took out a gun and pressed it to her stomach. She was screaming, begging for her life. 2 years later, he was sentenced to 5 years in prison for that incident. Now, you can say the media is portraying it like he was just getting his life together, but you are defying common sense to believe that this person suddenly became an exemplary character but happened to be high on fentanyl and methamphetamine. And just because he was a criminal doesn't mean he deserved to die at the knee of a police officer, but it does mean that I am not going to play a part of the broken Black culture that always wants to martyr criminals. Police brutality, racially motivated police brutality, is a myth. Not only are we allowing it to inspire riots in which black people are dying, but I will be damned if the rest of us have to suffer because of this incident that rarely ever happens in America. So here are some numbers. You have a 25% higher chance as a violent white criminal of dying at the hands of a police officer than you do as a black criminal. Last year, a total of 9 unarmed black men were killed by police officers and 19 white men were killed by police officers. Do some police officers do the wrong thing? Yes. It is no excuse to paint society with a broad brush. So this entire narrative is complete smoke and mirrors. It's all made up.
Is our nation being ripped apart by a total and complete lie, a provable lie, a lie used by cynical media manipulators and unscrupulous politicians who understand that racial strife, race hatred, is their path to power, even if it destroys the country? It's very clear, in fact, that many in power are pushing hard for racial division, for hatred, for violence. Tribal conflict will destroy a country faster than any plague. Their latest demand is that we eliminate the police entirely. No more law enforcement in this country. That would mean more power for the mob. They could do anything. It would mean never-ending terror for you and for your family. The death of a man at the hands of police in Minneapolis has led to demands that we fire the nearly 700,000 police officers who work in the United States, and that we free the 1.5 million criminals who are now behind bars. Defund the police. No sane person would dare to have said something like that in public just a week and a half ago. So what would happen to our country if we eliminated law enforcement? Eric Garcetti is the mayor of Los Angeles, the second biggest city in America. His city would devolve into a murderous hellscape within hours if the police left. But Garcetti won't push back against this idea. Instead, he kneeled in subservience before the people demanding it. Members of the National Guard kneeled too. So did a group of FBI agents. So did the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau. The police chief of Webster, Massachusetts went even further than that. He lay on the ground before them in complete submission. The mob wants victory, but more than that, it wants the total humiliation of its enemies.
I work for Black Lives Matter. Since I work for that company, my CEO has told me to come out today and to bring you on your knees because you have white privilege. So if they see that a white person is getting on their knees, that shows solidarity for the situation. And could you just please apologize for, for your white privilege?
I'm incredibly sorry.
What is going on? What is this about? No matter what they tell you, it has very little to do with Black lives, if only it did.
it's a movement that stands for anti-fascist or anti-fascism, and they sell themselves as being against fascism. So they're saying we are against a tyrannical form of government. Unfortunately, this is one of the most Orwellian organizations out there, in the same way that George Orwell's Ministry for Peace was in fact the Ministry for War, and in the same way that Orwell's Ministry for Truth was in fact a propaganda lying machine. Anti-fascists are themselves the most fascist organization around on the planet today. For democracy to fall, the only time we've ever seen democracies fall is when there is mob rule. And mob rule comes out, grows out of a movement where they take to the streets, burn things, destroy things. The brown shirts in Hitler's Germany, the Bolsheviks in the Russian Revolution, going all the way back to the French Revolution. Once you get anarchy on the streets, then your system of government can fall, and those determined to take over power hope to seize power through this. Its sole goal is to create mayhem on the streets. That's its purpose. They terrorize in order to bring down the establishment as they see it. What is it that they're fighting for? They're actually terrorizing the black community and making them feel they're oppressed. And the interesting thing is, all of these riots are taking place in Democrat-controlled areas, left-wing cities. So they claim to be fighting, Antifa claims to be fighting on behalf of the black community, but that they're not. That's not the case at all. Places like Minnesota have a black mayor, a black governor, black police chief. They had a black president for two terms. This is the tragedy. They think they are fighting some form of fascism. So they've been taught through the media, through the academic, through the universities, through the schools, and through Democrat politics. It's the most perverse and tragic scenario, because people, good-meaning people, are allowing themselves to be duped by Antifa into thinking they are fighting against fascism, when in fact all they are doing is promoting it.
Lo que yo creo es que hemos entrado en una fase a nivel mundial en el que el globalismo totalitario ha dado la cara. Y con Soros el globalismo totalitario da la cara y se enfrenta a los que nos hemos quedado del otro lado, que resulta que somos los únicos demócratas abiertos, que entendemos las cosas, que tenemos la libertad de expresión y que no permitimos que ningún totalitarismo intente controlar y más hacer ingeniería social. Pero realmente, ¿qué son las revoluciones de color? Son golpes de Estado. La de Ucrania, la de Georgia, de Egipto, las revoluciones en África, Burkina Faso, Senegal, las propias revoluciones que va a haber en Estados Unidos si pueden derrocar a Trump. Hablamos de totalitarismo porque hablamos de ingeniería social. Y cuando se toma en rehén a la sociedad civil global para pagarle dinero y que haga lo que nosotros queremos, yo llamo eso totalitarismo. ¿Y qué es ese gran capitalismo junto con ellos, los que manipulan las cuerdas ahora y los que controlan a Pedro Sánchez y a nuestro gobierno? Mientras no comprendamos que esos son totalitarios, porque controlan el capital y tienen muchas ganas de controlarlo y saber cómo hacerlo, no habremos entendido nada. Pues el propio presidente del gobierno, Pedro Sánchez, ha estado en el NDI, que es el NDI, el National Democratic Institute, que es el National Democratic Institute, el que estuvo al lado de la NED y de la Agencia de Cooperación Americana e Inglesa en las revoluciones de color y en los golpismos de Estado de las ex-repúblicas soviéticas. Es decir, pertenece en su currículum que ha estado en el NDI, y el NDI está financiado también por Soros, actuando de esa manera golpista en el mundo. Hablamos de totalitarismo por eso. Pero Sánchez además niega
y se niega a aceptar en el Comité de Transparencia que se hable de lo que habló con Soros. Cuidado, me gustaría saber cuáles han sido como español las conversaciones de mi presidente con un señor que se dedica a comprar países y a controlar estados. No es conspiranoia, es pura verdad y tenemos un gobierno con él.
As we've all seen over the last week, has been absolutely devastating. George Floyd's life mattered, and Breonna Taylor's life mattered, and Philando Castile's life mattered, and Tamir Rice's life mattered, and so did so many other people whose names we know and whose names we do not know. I was 11 or 12 years old. It was the LA riots, which was also triggered by a senseless act of racism. The other thing, though, that I do remember about that time was how people came together. And we are seeing that right now. We are seeing that from the sheriff in Michigan or the police chief in Virginia. We are seeing people stand in solidarity. We are seeing communities come together and to uplift. And you are going to be part of this movement. Because when the foundation is broken, so are we. So I am sorry that in a way we have not gotten the world to the place that you deserve it to be.
We're seeing the beginnings of a Bolshevik-style revolution in the United States to topple the republic and replace it with a communist-style government. We've got a number of issues at play here. We've got the whole deep state issue. We've got the infiltrators within the government who are loyal to their own agenda. They're not loyal to the Constitution as stated. And the news media is again culpable. They were co-opted back in the 60s, and they're on the payroll. They're on the payroll for the CIA. That is the propaganda arm of the Central Intelligence Agency, which is deeply involved in all of this nonsense. They don't fool around. This is what they do for a living. They topple governments around the world on a regular basis. And now our own republic that they're supposed to be defending is the target of their tradecraft. It's no holds bar for the bad guys, because if Trump succeeds, we're going to see probably 8,000 or 10,000 people hung by the neck until dead for sedition and treason against the American people. That's really what's going on. And the riots we're seeing in the street is just another facet of the same war that's been going on since Trump took office. That's what this war is all about, is to implement their globalist dream. Now remember, globalism is communism.
the foundation of the few controlling the many, you must divide and rule the many. It serves the agenda of divide and rule to have people under house arrest and everyone kept apart. It serves them with social distancing where everyone is kept apart. It serves them to have people wearing masks, which means that the human discourse and interaction is destroyed. But hold on a second. It also serves the agenda of divide and rule to have massive racial division. What has happened since these protests and riots began? It has driven people apart. It is dividing society. Because both serve the agenda of divide, you have this apparent contradiction of social distancing imposed and then social distancing completely ignored. It's not a problem. What they've had to do is get humanity to self-identify with the labels. And once you've got someone saying, I am black, I am white, now you have infinite potential for playing the labels off against each other. What is the worst nightmare of a global cult seeking to impose its will on humanity? Unity, harmony, coming together. Why are we limiting ourselves in our self-identity to I am black or I am white? Once you say I am white and I am black, now divisions can occur. The great illusion, and the one that we are being pressured to accept, is that different groups, whether they're black, white, or whatever, can be judged as one whole, as if they're all the same. And what that does is it creates group situations which you can divide and rule. This cult, at its core, is almost entirely white, and it is funding Black Lives Matter in basically a war on white people. Get on your knees and confess your white privilege. Why would this core of white people at the core of this cult want to create a war on white people? Because this is a war between the cult and the entirety of humanity. White, black, all of us. What has happened with this lockdown and this virus hoax, and what is happening with this racial divide and rule, is part of an ongoing sequence. And if we go on acquiescing and fighting among ourselves, that sequence is going to reach fruition. If we come back to Black Lives Matter, look at who funds them. They've been funded by George Soros. So, for instance, Black Lives Matter are now calling, not just for defunding the police and abolishing the police, but getting rid of prisons. Chaos, upheaval, crime, fear, rule of the mob. This is what they want. Anything that will create chaos and fear among the community. Basically, a jungle atmosphere, a jungle society, where there is no law, where the mob rules. Especially in this period between now and 2030, they want to transform human society into an Orwellian global fascist technocratic dictatorship that would make George Orwell wince. Now, while they're doing that, they want the population looking in the other direction. They want them constantly reacting to chaos, upheaval. And that's why we've gone seamlessly from the lockdown situation into the protests and the riots. Those people out protesting and trying to knock down statues. It's like Orwell said, who controls the past controls the future, who controls the present controls the past. And what they're doing is getting rid of history of the past. They're getting rid of the old normal in every way, so we then, through the generations, forget the old normal even exists. If you look at Orwell's 1984, he wrote a lot about the need to destroy history. It's very important. This great line, if we don't learn the lessons of history, we are destined to repeat them. Well, they don't want us to learn the lessons of history, because so many things that have happened in history, they want to happen now, but in the modern sense.
El exnuncio de los Estados Unidos, Carlo María Vigano, ha dirigido una carta abierta a Donald Trump en la que le muestra su apoyo y defensa. Vigano, en su carta al presidente de los Estados Unidos, explica el nuevo orden mundial como un sistema conformado por los hijos de la oscuridad, sobre el que se sustentan los medios de comunicación, las instituciones, la economía o la política. Malvados o descendientes de la serpiente, así llama Vigano a aquellos que, lejos de una búsqueda de la justicia y la paz, lejos de la honestidad y del deseo de hacer el bien, están librando estos días una guerra contra Trump. Y es que tanto las revueltas en los Estados Unidos o las protestas callejeras en Europa, como la misma pandemia del COVID-19, las explica este cardenal como una búsqueda del control de la humanidad, que no pretende sino acabar con aquellos del bando de los buenos para lograr la riqueza y el poder de unos pocos, algo a lo que se bautiza como Estado profundo. Pues tal y como dice en su carta, escondidos detrás de estos actos de vandalismo y violencia hay quienes esperan beneficiarse de la disolución del orden social para construir un mundo sin libertad. Vigano concibe a Trump como el único presidente de los Estados Unidos que defiende valientemente el derecho a la vida, que no se avergüenza de denunciar la persecución de los cristianos en todo el mundo, que habla de Jesucristo y del derecho de los ciudadanos a la libertad de culto. Pero el problema del Estado profundo que plantea esta carta no está solo en las cúpulas de poder de índole político o mediático, sino que, tal y como expresa Vigano, se ha impregnado incluso en la cúpula de la Iglesia Católica, la Iglesia profunda. La mentira es el instrumento de estas fuerzas profundas, que sin embargo ni para Trump ni desde luego para el cardenal Vigano suponen una amenaza, pues al final, dice el autor de la carta, el bien vence sobre el mal.
Dice en su carta el cardenal, hay un deep state en el Vaticano y esto es importantísimo, importantísimo. O sea, ¿qué podrá estar sucediendo en el Vaticano, dentro del Vaticano? Si este cardenal se ha atrevido a hablar en estos momentos, en esos términos, es porque tiene un apoyo dentro del Vaticano y algo tiene que estar sucediendo. El Papa Francisco no ha dicho nada después de esta carta.
Recordemos que sería la segunda revolución dentro o contrarrevolución dentro de la Iglesia en la época COVID, porque el Papa Bergoglio prohibió las misas en toda Roma y se le tuvieron que sublevar propios obispos diciendo que no se podía cerrar la Eucaristía a los cristianos. Es decir, él fue el primero que ordenó cerrar las iglesias en 2000 años de historia de cristiandad, con persecuciones cruentas, peste. Es decir, ese pulso parece que lo ganó el ala precisamente contra el Papa, porque al final se abrieron, es verdad que condiciones, el templo.
Cuando Albini Luciani aceptó la tierra papal a regañadientes y se convirtió en el Papa Juan Pablo I, enseguida se dio cuenta del grado de influencia de la masonería, de los jesuitas en los altos concilios del Vaticano. Tres de los grupos más influyentes en la Iglesia son los jesuitas, Opus Dei y los Caballeros de Malta. La Compañía de Jesús hoy en día es una fuerza rígidamente disciplinada de más de 50.000 miembros en el mundo. Fue fundada como una unidad de inteligencia política por la antigua oligarquía Europea como una nueva herramienta para implementar su objetivo histórico de eliminación de la institución neoplatónica del Estado, sea en su forma republicana o monárquica. La organización de jesuitas está estructurada de acuerdo con un modelo estrictamente militar, con su Estado Mayor General situado en Vaticano. Los jesuitas intentan crear un mundo sinárquico basado en 1. La drástica reducción del desarrollo tecnológico, 2. La derrota del capitalismo industrial de la clase media y 3. El debilitamiento general de los poderes soberanos de los estados-naciones que deberán ser sustituidos por agencias supranacionales de un mundo globalizado como el Banco Mundial, el Fondo Monetario Internacional, la UNESCO, el Instituto de la ONU para la Formación y la Investigación y el Consejo Mundial de las Iglesias.
Election of Cardinal Giorgia Bergoglio to the position of Pope Francis I was an unprecedented event the world has never before witnessed. It is the first time in history that a member of the Jesuit order has been elected to the highest position of the Roman Catholic Church. Widely regarded as a benevolent missionary order, known for its educational institutions, the Jesuit order, as the Society of Jesus is commonly known, has long played an incredibly influential, albeit secretive, role in the destinies of nations, organizations, and individuals. Rulers, presidents, scholars, and even Catholics themselves, who are aware of the evil perpetrated by this powerful, far-reaching order, have left on record grave warnings that all should heed. A number of those who sought to warn did so at the cost of their lives. Abraham Lincoln, 1809 to 1865, 16th President of the United States of America. This war, the American Civil War, 1860 to 1865, would never have been possible without the sinister influence of the Jesuits. We owe it to Popery that we now see our land reddened with the blood of her noblest sons. Though there were great differences of opinion between the South and North on the question of slavery, neither Jeff Davis nor any one of the leading men of the Confederacy would have dared to attack the North had they not relied on the promise of the Jesuits that under the mask of democracy, the money and the arms of the Roman Catholics, even the arms of France, were at their disposal if they would attack us. So many plots have already been made against my life that it is a real miracle that they have all failed when we consider that the great majority of them were in the hands of skillful Roman Catholic murderers evidently trained by the Jesuits. I know that Jesuits never forget nor forsake, but man must not care how and where he dies, provided he dies at the post of honor and duty. The Jesuit order is responsible for some of the most heinous acts in recorded history. They have battled truth and righteousness, crushed religious liberty, influenced kings, and sought to mold the course of history to carry out their own agenda. Now that the visible head of the Roman Catholic Church is himself a member of this order, the power of the Jesuit order is complete. Let all who love truth, all who love freedom, take heed and beware of the danger now facing the world in the person of Pope Francis I.
Para el 2015, durante plena campaña electoral en Estados Unidos, a Francis se le ocurrió la oportuna idea de viajar al país más rico del mundo, de mayoría protestante, sin razón aparente. También tuvo la oportunidad de estrecharle la mano a Hillary y entrevistarse con dos personas que, al día de hoy, junio de 2020, tienen un peso determinante en el sombrío destino del mundo. El entonces vicepresidente Joe Biden y la veterana demócrata Nancy Pelosi. Ambos católicos, ambos amigos laicos de la Compañía de Jesús y soldados fieles de la familia Clinton. Dicho sea de paso, una asociación de católicos tradicionales le envió a Trump una solicitud para que investigue la corrupción de la Iglesia Católica estadounidense, el golpe de Estado contra Benedicto y la influencia ilegal e inmoral de los obispos en la contienda electoral. El Banco Vaticano, el mismo del escándalo masónico del Banco Ambrosiano y el mismo que financiaba organizaciones terroristas, ahora se reúne abiertamente con la coalición de energía innovadora de Bill Gates y George Soros. Mientras avanzamos de manera acelerada hacia la dictadura totalitaria global que temía Aldous Huxley, el nombre de Francisco comienza a mencionarse como un protagonista muy especial de este nuevo orden. Una vez más, Francisco ha sido un pionero, vistiéndose de estadista estrella de la salud pública, que sigue al pie de la letra las recomendaciones de la OMS y además se las impone a todos los católicos del mundo. Finalmente surgieron las protestas masivas en los Estados Unidos, que en este mismo momento están asediando la Casa Blanca y amenazando la estabilidad del gobierno de Trump. El rival de Trump en estos nuevos comicios, ¡qué casualidad!, es San Joe Biden, que en el hipotético caso de que Trump sea derribado por un impeachment del Congreso, su sucesora constitucional es la presidente de la Cámara de Representantes, o sea, Santa Nancy Pelosi. Parece que el Deep State y Pope Francis, que como bien sabemos no se llevan muy bien con la idea de democracia, están inaugurando la primavera norteamericana. El tiempo, señores, nos juega en contra, y si no reaccionamos a tiempo, podemos terminar sometidos a una brutal esclavitud.